Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
Fedco test, audio test.
take your seats, please. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7. That's quorum. Can we carry the entire agenda in bulk? Well, I think we should at least get some of the preliminaries out of the way before the chief shows up. We do have a quorum. Any declarations of interest? Confirmation of minutes, April 1st. Carried. Communications received.
No quorum, Peter.
Yeah, we do have a quorum. They're all in the room. Count them. It was just only one that wasn't in the room. Anyway, we're now on report number 1.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, bienvenue. If you'd like to speak to any item on the agenda, if you could please see the clerk at the door, and we'll be happy to hear from you. Declarations of interest. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès verbeux. Minutes 42, 1st of April, 2014. Carried. Communications as received. City Manager's Office Comprehensive Legal Services Report for the period January 1st to March 31st, 2014. Rapport général sur les services juridiques pour la période de 1er janvier au 31 mars 2014. Received. Item number 2, 2014 Operating and Capital Budget Q1 Status Report. I have a question. Come back to that. Item number 3, 2013 Purchasing Year in Review. Received. Delegation of authority contracts awarded for the period of October 1st to December 31st, 2013. Délégation de pouvoir, contrat accordé pour la période de 1er octobre au 30 décembre 2013. Hold. Item number 5, Dave Smith Youth Treatment Center. We have one speaker in agreement. Are there questions on this? If there's consensus on it, there's Dave Smith right there and Glenn Barnes. Is there any questions on this? Councillor McRae.
Mr. Mayor, no question. Thank you for this. Just want to say congratulations to our staff of the day and the council of the day for putting this agreement in place. When I read the report, I was so pleased to see how we could keep working in future cooperation, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge what a super job that center does and how it's changed the lives of a lot of people. And I know Councillor Clark was the leader of the ROMC at that point, and again, I know with Dave Smith here, his name is on that building, and it's great that we can actually help a group like this and protect taxpayers' interests at the same time, but move things forward in a creative way. So I wanted to acknowledge that, Mr. Mayor.
Great. On the report, carried. So unless Glenn, give us a wave over there. Glenn and Dave obviously are the two individuals behind this project, and it's passed, so you agreed with it, and thank you very much for the great work that you do, and good luck with the new build in West Carleton. I know Councillor El Shantiri is very supportive as well, so bravo. Thank you. Item number 6, federal gas tax agreement. Some new changes on that. We retain the same amount this year. It goes up in 2 years with the cost of living escalator clause. Carried. Item number 7, Innovation Center. We have a presentation on that. Item number 8, Fiber Media Incorporated Municipal Access Agreement. Carried. I wish we could charge more, but we can't. Item number 9, Brownfields Property Tax Assistance Rehab Grant. Councillor
Please hold, Mr. Mayor. I have lots of questions for staff.
Hold that. Item number 10, amendment to the agreement of purchase and sale for 2720 Richmond Road and former Grant Alternative School, modification de la convention d'achat et de vente. We have a speaker who's in agreement with it. Are there any questions by committee? No, if the speaker is here, le comité est d'accord avec la recommandation. Alors, do you have a question of staff? Okay, well, we'll hold it and we'll have to have the delegation hold. We'll come back to that. Item number 11, office to purchase Parkway House. We have an amendment from Councillor Taylor, so we'll come back to that. Item number 12, brownfield rehabilitation. There are questions on that. Item number 13, feasibility report on potential public-private partnership for planned recreational complex in southeast Ottawa. Councillor's report. Councillor Deans has a question. Item number 14 is in camera on collective bargaining update, so we'll go in camera for that. So the first item that we have a delegation for is item number 10. Amendment to the agreement of purchase and sale for 2720 Richmond Road, former Grant Alternative School. We have a delegation, Monsieur Roger Farley of CMFO. Monsieur Farley, si vous êtes prêt, le micro est ouvert pour 5 minutes pour donner votre discours. Et après ça, on avait une question de Monsieur Clark, conseiller Clark. Alors, la table est juste à la droite de Monsieur Monette. Bienvenue. S'il vous plaît, poussez le bouton.
Alors, bon matin tout le monde. Mon nom est Roger Farley. Je suis le président du conseil d'administration du Centre multiservice francophone de l'Ouest d'Ottawa. So I am the chair of the board of the Centre multiservice francophone for Ottawa West. So our project is really to have the former Grant School at the corner of Carling and Richmond and convert the school into a community center. So it's a project that the community has been working on for several years, and we have several partners with us. So the partners are the Collège La Cité, who will use some space to provide training services for young adults in French. We have le Conseil des écoles publiques de l'Est de l'Ontario, who will have deep care and also adult learning activities. We have le Centre GIG qui va offrir des services aux personnes âgées, des services à domicile, en étant basés dans l'Ouest d'Ottawa, parce que présentement ils ont un centre au centre-ville ici. Et on a ensuite des organismes fondateurs, le Centre Amis Jeunesse, qui s'occupe de la pauvreté chez les jeunes, donc ils offrent des services dans les écoles francophones partout dans la ville d'Ottawa. On a également le Centre Soleil qui offre des services pour les personnes âgées, services créatifs, et finalement le Centre Franc-Ouest des activités communautaires. Donc ce sont nos partenaires. On a reçu une subvention du ministère de l'Agriculture de l'Ontario pour transformer l'école en centre communautaire. Et les plans ont été déposés à la ville l'année dernière. Les plans ont été approuvés. Il y a eu des consultations publiques. Tout est dans l'ordre. Donc maintenant, on est prêt à procéder à la construction dès que nous prenons possession de l'école.
Bon, merci beaucoup, M. Farley. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions pour la délégation? Are there any questions for the delegation? No, I think there's a question. Merci. Et bonne chance avec le projet. Je sais que votre conseil et tous les membres du conseil appuient ce projet. C'est dynamique pour l'Ouest de la ville, pour la communauté francophone. Alors, bonne chance.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Conseiller Clark has a question to staff.
On dit, Monsieur Délégation, enfin, the only real question I have, Peter, is Item 2, direct staff to execute an encroachment agreement. We do a lot of that stuff, and I just wonder what encroachment agreement is. A building encroachment. I'm having a little trouble understanding what you're doing there.
Sure. There's an existing building on the site. When the original deal was put together, the organization was going to buy parcel A and parcel B, so we didn't really have to worry about the second building in the back. But since we're now we'll be selling parcel A to them now, and parcel B is an option to be executed next year. Where the property line is between parcel A and parcel B, the parcel of the building in the back slightly encroaches onto parcel A, so we need to have an encroachment agreement in place to cover off that encroachment over the property line. The end result, or the plan, though, is to demolish that building anyway. So, but this is just to make it right for the time being.
That was as opposed to merely adjusting the property lines between the two lots?
The location of that building makes it very tough you'd have to wiggle the property line around it, so it's better just to have the straight line and do the encroachment agreement.
The only other question is, what's the size of property A?
I think, let me ask one of my staff if they could pop down here with that information.
There is, Council, on page 9,
Yeah, I know. It
site
doesn't tell
plan.
me exactly what size it is. It's, the document has...
2.14 acres is the size of parcel A.
It's reasonable size.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And just to Councillor Clark's point, a question on size of parcel A. Just as an aside, there is a fairly large front lawn on that property, as well as the facade of the building that are designated heritage. So while it's a large swath of land, the actual amount that the Francophone Centre is going to be able to use is fairly small. They have to maintain the rest as heritage. I just wanted to ask members of committee to support this. It's been a long kind of running project in our community. It's taken some time to navigate some of the community hurdles, but we've got there, and we certainly look forward to the centre opening its doors in the coming year, and feel that this amendment will enable them to start out of the gate strong.
Thank you very much. Des autres questions? On the report, carried. Thank you. The next item we have a delegation for is offer to purchase Parkway House, 2475 Regina Street. I'll ask before the delegation comes up, because Councillor Taylor has, I believe, a replacement motion for the report, so I'll ask you to introduce that. And do members of committee have that? And is it up on the screen? We'll put it on the screen. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you having conversations, we'd ask you leave the room. The acoustics in this room are very bad, and please head outside if you want to have a chat. Councillor Taylor has the floor with a motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this is simply a motion that would be with respect to the report, so it doesn't replace the report. The recommendation of the report is that at this point in time, this is Parkway House is a facility in my ward that cares for 12 folks with profound physical disabilities. It's a very unique situation, as the report lays out. It's a piece of property that lives under a covenant. It was sold to the organization from the city years ago, and the covenant restricts the use of the property for the purposes of support for men and women with physical disabilities. Currently, there is also an offer or an agreement right of first refusal if the organization ever wished to sell the property. The organization came forward to the city and said that they were interested in selling the property. We've had some preliminary discussions with them, very rapid ones. They wish to sell the property to a private condominium developer and contemplate redeveloping the property and including them in it. We are not 100% certain of how that would take place. And so while in good faith we can't recommend, the staff can't recommend that council exercise its option and buy the property at the moment, what my motion does is directs our staff to make every attempt possible to try to engage Parkway House to come to the table and have some fruitful discussion between now and council date, at which point in time there may be other options on the table besides moving forward with a private condo development. And that's what my motion does, is direct staff to make an attempt to enter into those discussions.
So this is, you're keeping the main motion and adding this as an addendum?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so it is up on the screen, and we have Julia Goodman, Lincoln Heights Parkway Community Association. Good morning, Ms. Goodman. If you could take the floor, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and right there, and just push the button, and we welcome you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Julia Goodman. I'm the president of the Lincoln Heights Parkway Community Association. The Community Association represents residents and homeowners of the area within which Parkway House sits. We would like to make members of this committee aware of the following points at this time. During extensive discussions within the community at the time of the previous redevelopment proposal by Parkway House, made in 2009, 4 major issues arose. It is the belief of the executive of the Community Association that all 4 issues still exist. So those issues are, 1, residents of the area are clearly opposed to out-of-scale development on the Parkway House site. Secondly, residents are concerned about increased traffic on Regina Street. The property is not on an arterial road, and the street already has traffic volume and safety issues. Thirdly, residents are concerned that the redevelopment proposals by Parkway House do not match the city's intention for the use of the land, as expressed in the minutes of council in 1978 and instantiated by the covenant. And fourthly, residents are also concerned about the ongoing welfare of the 12 residents of Parkway House, who are members of our community. The Board of Directors of the Halcyon Carlton Condominium Corporation number 89, a condo of 250 tax-paying homeowners located across the Ottawa River Parkway from the Parkway House site, has asked me to convey to the committee this morning that its residents are very concerned, as they were back in 2009, about out-of-scale development on the Parkway House property. A particular concern of the Halcyon residents is the additional traffic on Richmond Road, which is already so heavy that they have difficulty entering and exiting the Halcyon property. With respect to the current issue of the offer to the city to purchase the property, the Lincoln Heights Parkway Community Association applauds Councillor Taylor's efforts to engage the Parkway House board members to explore all potential positive solutions to the issue of the housing of its 12 residents. This file is complex, and the exploration of all potential positive solutions and the discussion of those solutions with the stakeholders are not complete. As a result, at this time, it is not possible for the views of the residents and homeowners of the area regarding the proposed redevelopment or any alternatives to be known. The Community Association executive understands why the staff's recommendation to this committee is that the city decline the offer to purchase the property. However, it is our hope that the various stakeholders would come to the table to arrive at the best solution which meets the needs of Parkway House and respects the views of the community. The Community Association executive is fully committed to supporting this discussion within its membership.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the delegation? No? Thank you very much for your time. Now questions and comments to staff on Councillor's motion or the main motion. So on the motion as presented by Councillor Taylor for the, I guess it's a 1-month opportunity to engage. Carried. Sorry, Councillor Hume.
I'm just a little confused at, do we know what effect this will have on the agreement that Parkway House has with their development partner?
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, at this point, or Councillor, at this point, to the best of our knowledge, we don't. They don't have an agreement. The discussions to which we've been privy are essentially that the private developer wishes Parkway House to get the city to waive off its right to purchase. There is a covenant issue that needs to be dealt with, that there's a difference of opinion on that covenant issue. They want Parkway House to deal with that covenant issue with the city, which would have to be through the planning department. And then once the property is free and clear and able to be developed, then they'll engage with them in a purchase arrangement. So there's a lot of hurdles, and my prime purpose is to try and help.
I just don't want to be doing something that intervenes between an agreement of purchase and sale that causes further complications. That's all.
Of course.
Okay, so on the amendment by Councillor Taylor, carried. On the main motion as amended, carried. All right, so we're going back to the beginning where there were questions. Item number 2, I had held City Treasurer's Report 2014 Operating and Capital Budget, and I'd asked the City Manager a little while ago when these numbers came out what plan of action we have to deal with the shortfall now, start planning now before the next period of snow comes our way, hopefully not until late November or December. Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, through the month of May, myself, executive and senior management team will be conducting a discretionary spending review to identify how we can create a buffer within the budget sufficient to cover the deficit that we've incurred in the first quarter's operations, primarily from winter maintenance.
Thank you. Are there other questions on the status report? Received. Item number 4, delegation of authority, contracts awarded. Councillor Egli had questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. On page 2 of the report, there is a $18,000 or so cost for the printing of 15,000 Paramed first aid field reference materials. Are they for in-house use, or are they for the public?
Through the mayor, which number is that, Councillor?
It's on page number 2. Just give me a second here. It's page 2 of the schedule, and
item 3.
not the whole thing.
I think just as a suggestion, we'll see if we can find this.
It's item number 3 on page number 2.
I see it, but I'm just going to suggest to members of committee that there are literally hundreds of these contracts, and if you can give staff a heads up that you have a question on that, they can bring the appropriate material. But I think he's got the big binder there, so hopefully we'll.
No, and I appreciate that. It's a more. So what I'm trying to find out is this something? We're spending $18,000 or so on printing. Is this something we could have done online and made accessible? That's what I'm asking. Is for the staff? Is it for the public? What's the use? And could we have put it online as opposed to spending the money on printing?
In this particular publication is available both online and in hard copy. So obviously it's used for public distribution at meetings and whatnot.
Okay. Okay. And the other question is, and you don't need to find the specific one for this, but there's a phrase that pops up on any number of the contracts, and it says, on an as and when requested basis. But then there's a fixed price. So my question is that a maximum amount that the city is paying for these particular contracts, or do we pay that price regardless of whether we call for the service 4 times or 8 times or 27 times? What does that number reflect in terms of that particular comment? Because it runs right through the report, that comment.
Those prices are estimated prices, so we only pay for the goods or services that we order.
So in effect, that is a maximum number. Or thereabouts.
It's a maximum in that we can't exceed it without amending the contract, but it is an estimated cost because the quantity is not known at the onset.
No, I appreciate that, but what I guess what I'm getting at is when we see that number, that's actual, you can't spend more than that without going back and redoing the contract.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eglai. Are there other questions? Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you. When I look at this report, I guess page 5, we have lower consumption causing revenue reduction. To some extent, that might have been optimistic in the revenue side to start with, but I see that how optimistic it was is balanced by the next paragraph. It says that the reserves had a forecast net balance of $5.1 million, which would be available to deal with the 2014 deficit. Well,
sorry, Councillor, we're on a different item now.
We are?
We're on the procurement bylaw. We passed the
we passed that, did we?
Yeah.
Oh, too bad.
So did you have a question on procurement?
No.
Okay. All right. On the delegation of authority contracts awarded, carried, received rather.
I thought you had held this one.
The next item, and we have a presentation from staff, Innovation Center Implementation, Business Feasibility Study, Funding Agreement, and Land Lease Agreement. We also have a hard copy in color for each member of council of the Innovation Center proposal, and we have Saad Bashir. I'd like to welcome Steve West. Steve, as many of you know, is his day job is president of MDS Nordion, a very successful company in our community, and he is the chair of the Innovation Center at Bayview Board of Directors. And I wanted to take this opportunity on behalf of all members of council to thank Steve very much. There's a lot of work that's going into this particular project, culminating today in a very exciting business plan and proposal and artist renditions of what the center will look like. And Steve is a volunteer and has put a lot of hours into this, including the search for an expanded board of directors, and we very much welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jim. And on that note, I'd also like to thank all the other board members too that have been contributing their time and expertise to this project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, members of the committee. We have a brief presentation to take you through some of the developments that have taken place since the last time you saw a presentation on this topic, which was December of 2013. The purpose of this report in front of you is back in December, Council directed us to go ahead and create a non-profit corporation that would oversee the development and execution. You also gave us the sign-off on the initial board of directors and also set out a process to recruit further board members. You also asked us to create draft lease agreement as well as contribution agreements between the City of Ottawa and the Innovation Center entity. And in front of you, the report has all of those things, and we'll go and talk about each one of those items. So the screen in front of you has a recommendation summary. One, we are asking Council FEDCO to approve the business feasibility. We're asking you to approve the contribution agreement, which is going to oversee the $15 million in cash contribution that the city has received from the province of Ontario. We're also asking you to approve the land lease between the city and the Innovation Center for a certain portion of the city-owned Bayview Yards. As part of the city's contribution towards the provincial $15 million, one of the ways in which we're going to make up that matching funding is through initiating a very specific community improvement plan for waiving municipal taxes for that particular address. We're also asking you to approve certain cash contributions because they're not allowed in the provincial agreement, and they're listed in front of you, the first one being the capital amount of about $400,000, mostly for servicing. The second item for $250,000 is for environmental remediation around the site. and the last one, $332,000, is an amount we would require in 2016 to take care of certain operating expenses which are again not covered by the provincial agreement. The work that has been completed to date, you have in front of you a list of the initial board of members, including Steve. We also have Doug McClarty, who is one of the other volunteer board members who has been giving a tremendous amount of time towards this project. Since the beginning of this year, we have engaged with various consultants to work on the business feasibility, the financial feasibility, the design concepts. We also had an open house back in March, and I was very much pleasantly surprised with the overwhelming community response. More than 250 folks showed up to the open house, in a temperature which was about -30 Celsius, and spent a good chunk of the day figuring out how to best make use of that facility. We also had another open house on Saturday, on April 26th, specifically for the local neighborhood community, and again, very pleasantly surprised to see 100+ folks from the neighborhood show up and got a tour and were able to ask a lot of questions. The additional 6 board members were recruited through a public recruitment process, and the names are in front of you. And the idea was to make sure that the board had the right type of skills that it would require from now until the next 2 years, when this phase 1 of Innovation Center is going to be up and running. We were also successful in getting the province to review the feasibility and provide their sign-off, which is also attached to the staff report. This is just a visual, just to orient you where the location is. And it's right by the only intersection of current O train and the future LRT station. We have a 2-minute video that we're going to play towards the end of this slide deck, and one of my partners who have been helping me, Janek from Prototype D, is going to come up front and is going to take the committee through some of the animation that have been created for this project. I'll spend a couple of minutes on this slide just to walk you through the building. For those of you who have been inside the building, this is a very open space. As one architect said, it's an architect's playground. Different components of the place are going to be used for different purposes. On the right-hand side of that image, you see something called the incubator hall, which is really the first place where an entrepreneur who has an idea that needs to be tested out would come here and would maybe come for a day, for a week, for a few months. And many of those initial ideas, many of those entrepreneurs, once they go through in any level of detail, they find out that perhaps that idea is not practical or not feasible. And some of them leave, or some of them jump onto another idea. But some of them are going to have a serious product. Some of them are going to have investors who are going to be interested in investing in them. And you see right in the middle of that diagram something called the accelerator, which is going to house some of those serious entrepreneurs who do have a product that is getting some attention. In front of the building, right in the middle again, you see places like Headspace and the Well and the Cafe, and those are again places for people and entrepreneurs to meet and have discussions in a very open environment. There are going to be certain entrepreneurs who, even after they have been very successful, still want to have a footprint at this place, because best practices suggest that many of the successful graduates want to continue to be linked with an innovation center. On the left-hand side, you see an item called rental offices, and that's this place where successful entrepreneurs can still rent out at market rent an office space where they could again have a footprint at this facility. Second floor on the left-hand side is the corporate offices, which are going to be the future offices of Invest Ottawa and other agencies that provide support. At the back of the building, you're going to have a couple of value-added services not just for the tenants of the facility, but also for the local community. One of them is the maker space, which is a place where you can have access to heavy-duty industrial-grade 3D printers and other fabrication equipment to create your first prototype or to create your first test run. And then a small digital media lab, which is going to help create the animation and the app development activity at the center. quick summary of how the financial feasibility, and there's a whole pro forma that has been attached to this staff report. But at a very high level, we are receiving $15 million from the province, specifically for capital, and most of it is going to be applied towards the renovation of the building and the fit-up of the building. The city is supposed to match its $15 million towards the province, and we are doing that in two ways. One, we are providing the land in kind, as well as providing the servicing, which is about $8.4 million. And then there's a whole suite of other operating expenses of around $7 million that are going to make up our $15 million. This list, you'll recall, you would have seen in December, and I just wanted to throw that list in the slide deck just to thank all the people, and this is just a sample of hundreds of organizations and hundreds of folks that we have gone out to consult with on this project and who have been very generous with their time and with their insights. We also had a few focus groups that were held specifically designed for the people who would end up using the Innovation Center, and a lot of their feedback has been incorporated. And in addition to all the local folks that we spoke with, we also had a one-on-one phone conversation with those CEOs of those innovation centers that you see on the slide. All of those centers have won various awards. They have been recognized for what they are doing. And we specifically asked them about the location and what would make this location work or wouldn't work. And there were three things that were very common trends that were gained by that consultation. One of them was community revitalization, and how important it was that you want to be in a place where you can use your center as a catalyst. The second was access to public transportation, and as we have mentioned, this is the only place where O-Train and LRT are going to intersect. And the third one was the nature of the place. The new flavor of innovation centers is not to create brand new buildings, but to renovate existing industrial type spaces for the use of the entrepreneurs. We also have an informal group of advisory panel that, in addition to the volunteer board, has been used by us as a sounding board for a lot of ideas. I won't go through the names, but some of them are in Ottawa, some of them are outside, and they have been electronically very, very useful in terms of providing us the feedback that we've required. I think on this slide I'm going to hand it over to Steve, if you wanted to say a few words, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Saad, for walking us through that. As Saad has indicated, this very exciting project has a lot of momentum now and has some unique aspects to it that we think don't necessarily exist in some of the other incubators in Canada. In particular, this has been very well received by the community, and this is going to be an anchor for the community, both in Mechanicsville and Hintonburg, as well as being a go-to place as well that will foster the innovation and creativity by attracting talent and attracting money and attracting interest both across Canada and we believe also internationally. So this really is an opportunity for the city to demonstrate that it's in business for jobs, wealth creation, entrepreneurs, and to be a magnet, frankly, for this activity.
Thanks, Steve. And the next slide is the last slide before we move on to the more interesting aspect, which is the video. Just to take you through the timelines and next steps, one of the first things that is going to happen after, if Council approves the report, is for the Innovation Center Board to go hire a project manager, also known as owner's rep or construction manager. They would also be issuing an RFP to hire an architect. That architect, the owner's rep, with the board are going to create a design-build package that will again be RFP'd towards the end of this year. The renovation of the building is expected to begin early next year, with the fit-up happening early in 2016. And the idea is that when Invest Ottawa's lease is up at 80 Aberdeen Street, that there's a nice transition between that time frame and the Innovation Center being up and running. So I'll ask Janet to come join us, and we have a 2-minute video that will show some renderings of the center. Go ahead.
So we prepared some visioning of the building in its current state. Many of you have been there, and many members of the public have been there. But these few seconds give you a sense of the inside the building and its present state. It is a very unique building in the city. It comes from an industrial heritage and has had many industrial uses. Architecturally, it's a very fascinating building, and as Saad was saying, it's open to receive very many uses. It has large open industrial spaces, and these spaces have been imagined to receive those elements that Saad was mentioning. The next few minutes here will show you architecturally some of the ideas that are going into the Innovation Center. So we looked at the space both inside and outside and how it could receive new life, and some of these interior renderings are going to depict different visions of how it can be fit up inside, but you also see images like this where we've utilized extensively the industrial nature of the building, and we've incorporated things. To the left you'll see we have a community garden on the roof. Right behind that we're proposing a 10 kilowatt solar energy installation for utilization within the facility. We've implemented some new features. In the center there you can see a new courtyard tying together all of the different elements, spaces of the building. Above that you'll see that there's a new rooftop level concourse which goes out to fully accessible patios. This is the exterior of the building, and you can see that we've proposed extensive redevelopment of that space with new landscaping all the way around. While respecting the heritage, we have incorporated things like sunshades to allow the solar penetration to be reduced. This quick panoramic gives you, and if we can pause it maybe here, gives you a sense of how the largest architectural change that has been implemented, where we've opened up the central area, made it fully accessible, and made it able to receive several hundred visitors for presentations, and as Saad was saying, to make it fully open to the public and to really engage innovators. These are some of the views of the rooftop patio. So this glass concourse through the middle, it opens out into 3 season meeting rooms, fully open meeting spaces. There's seating, there's vegetation, and we've also proposed some sun and solar shades out there to make it fully utilizable throughout the year. It would be nice if there was an outdoor rink there perhaps one day, but here's a quick view on the inside. So this is within that open cafe area, and we've proposed some, you can see that the space is very open. It has, it allows a lot of natural light into it, which we've mediated through those solar shades. And this is the most open central space here, and it is the most open to the public. We wanted to give you a sense of time moving through the space with some of these renderings. And to the left there's the reception desk, which will host the concierge service and guide people through the space. A quick view inside the incubator hall, the corporate offices, some of the executive boardrooms and meeting spaces. This is a quick look at the Maker Lab. We've created both an industrial but open to community space. And we've really utilized open concept working arrangements and to celebrate new ways of working. This gives you a first view of the Phase B element to it and an overall, perhaps, end state of how it may look. The Phase B tower will incorporate up to 180,000 additional square feet when that phase is reached, and many steps have been done to integrate it both architecturally and stylistically into the Innovation Center building.
Thanks for that very short presentation. You've summarized your last 3 months of work into 2 minutes. Thanks very much, Yannick.
Close.
And Mr. Mayor, that's it.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you very much to Prototype D. It was the first time I'd seen the video, and I think if people have a chance to see that, we should put it on our website because it's something we should be very, very proud of. And also, I think the other thing to remember is that we will be able to connect 3 of the post-secondary institutions via light rail, because we're going to have Ottawa U connected through Bayview, which then connects by the O train to Carleton, and then connects to Algonquin in Phase 2, which will be obviously well utilized by the post-secondary institutions. So thank you very much, Sad, for your work. I know you've put a lot of effort into this, to Steve and our city manager, who did a lot of the heavy lifting with the province to get the sign-off basically on the business plan so that we can move forward with this very exciting city building initiative. Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say, first of all, this building is here. I'll just go back a little bit because of the efforts of the community in saving this building in the first place. And Linda Holt is in the audience today, and she was very instrumental, along with members of the community, for keeping this building. And that's allowed us to be where we are today, that we can move forward with such a great example of a readaptive use of this building. It was just absolutely fantastic. And so in line with that, I just want to thank Saad Bashir and Steve West and all the people that worked to make this a reality, Kent and everybody that was involved in the city. The community, as was mentioned by Steve, is very happy with this. They can't believe it. When this whole thing started with this building, the key thing was that they have a space to use in their community. And when this was presented, it was just overwhelming, the support for this. So I really just want to say thank you for listening to the community and coming up with such a great proposal. To Prototype D, they've really helped sell this. They've got a fabulous grasp of what is needed at an innovation center, and it's really helped showcase it and help us promote this within the city. Very proud that it's in Kitchissippi. It's in the right place, and really looking forward to moving forward with this. Thank you.
And I think the other thing to add is that as a result, I believe, Councillor Hobbs, of your direction, there is open space and public gathering space that the adjoining community can use, the cafe space, the large area for public meetings and so on. So I think it becomes a real community hub as well as a transportation and entrepreneurship hub. So thank you. So questions of members of council, or committee rather? No? Well, listen, thank you very much. On the report, carried. Carrie, this is very exciting, and we wish you the best in the next phase. The next item, Councillor McRae had questions to staff on Brownfields Property Tax Assistance Rehabilitation Grant and Development Charge Reduction Program application for 460 Saint Laurent Boulevard. So who will, Mr. Smith and colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got Mr. Buchanan with me, who's the actual author of the report, who's the one that's involved in processing our Brownfields applications under the Brownfields CIP, and we're able to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and appreciate that Carrie Thompson is here as well. So first of all, I want to start off by saying to Councillor Clark, through the Mayor, that I will be supporting this report, and the purpose of me holding it is to actually get some questions asked and answered on the record about the Brownfields policy as described in this report, because it seems to be very clear to me what the policy is, and in a later report, in the same agenda, we're being asked to do something different. So I'm going to ask staff to take us through some of the comments that were raised. And I guess I want to talk about the development of the policy. If staff could explain why the council policy was changed from 2007 to the one that was updated and amended, if you will, in 2010. And I was very involved with that policy development in the last term of council, but the sweeping statement staff used is that it was updated to reflect best practices. So I wonder if we could explain why it's 50% and not 100%, please.
I don't think anybody at the table, Mr. Mayor, was involved in the work that was undertaken with the update of the Brownfields policy, but at a very high level, I think there's an underlying principle that the Brownfields is meant as a means to incentivize moving forward with the rehabilitation of Brownfield site for development purposes. And clearly, once those sites are developed, they do provide an economic benefit to the property owner in terms of the resulting development. So this is an ability to allow for some offset offsetting of the additional costs that would be incurred. Many of those costs would be incurred in any event, but there are some additional costs associated with actual cleanup, tipping fees that are associated with removal of contaminated materials, and some other things that might have to happen that are beyond. So the 50%, and again, not having been involved when the actual policy review was undertaken and the update done in 2010, my understanding is that there's a sense that there was a balance that we were looking to achieve here in terms of incentivizing, but also still some responsibility on the part of the owners.
Sure, and thank you. Through the mayor, will staff be coming forward next term with a policy to change it to 100%? Is that on your agenda that you're aware of?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not on our agenda to look at introducing further changes to get into a 100% category. If there's a direction to do so, we'll investigate it, but it's not something that we were looking to proactively initiate.
Okay, and in reading this report through the mayor, there's comments about the process, the things that are looked at by an environmental consulting firm, if you will. So in terms of the amount of money it would cost, or the problems that a developer could see on a site, is that something that should be picked up by their consultant when they're looking at that land, when they're surveying it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the extensive due diligence that one would expect is undertaken by any purchaser of a property, and particularly when there is awareness and knowledge. I mean, there are requirements for Phase 1 environmental assessments to give an indication as to if there is the potential for contamination that would have to be dealt with. So that, I mean, any prudent developer, it's all part of a due diligence process that one would expect that they would follow. Once they get into the process, again, there's requirements for these types of studies to be submitted to the city, and then the option is there, if there is contamination, for them to take advantage of the brownfields policy.
And through the mayor to Mr. Smith, so Mr. Smith, would a purchaser, in your opinion, take into account when they're about to buy a piece of property the cost to rehabilitate a brownfield site? Would that be something that a prudent purchaser, doing their due diligence with their lawyers, their consultants, would they take that into account when they buy a piece of property, do you think?
Again, I'm sure it varies quite significantly from one potential purchaser developer to another. Again, it's the degree of expenditure that they want to undertake with respect to their due diligence, and to what extent they can actually undertake assessments to confirm the nature of the contamination or what the real cost might be associated with cleanup. But at least there should, I would suspect, be a high level of understanding in terms of order of magnitude that you would be encountering.
Sure. And to Mr. Thompson, in terms of applicability of a bylaw, Mr. Thompson, would one expect that if you buy a piece of property, there's a bylaw in place that says 50%, that they could rely that that would be the amount they would be reimbursed? Would that be an expectation that a developer would have if they fit the criteria?
Yes, that's correct. That would be the reasonable expectation.
Sure. So in this case, where the cost is about $3 million, the developer could reasonably expect that 1.5 would be their return, and then when you look at the incremental taxation, there's a real true value to the city. In cleaning up the brownfield with the developer, we get good development and we get taxation. But in terms of the application of the policy, we want to be consistent in doing so that there is expectations in the development community that you can get refunded or enriched, if you will, by this policy in a just way.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that's a correct and reasonable expectation.
Okay. And I guess, Mr. Mayor, my last question about this particular file is again, in reading it, it's very clear. The costs are very clear to me. There's $3 million. There's a table. We talk about the capping at the 50% line, how much it's going to cost to bring backfill in. It's very transparent, very open. So I guess, Mr. Smith, my question would be, before your department would render a thumbs up or a thumbs down on an amount, would you want to see this kind of data in front of you for specificity? Is that important?
I'll answer the question, but if I'm incorrect, I'm sure Mr. Buchanan will correct me. But yes, the requirement is that the detailed information is provided to us so that we can accurately determine what the amount of the brownfields contribution would be that the city would provide.
And that would be a basic minimum that council would expect, so the taxpayers' interests are protected, that we're not offering a blank check, if you will.
absolutely, we need that good, sound understanding to be able to bring something forward for approval by committee and council.
Okay, well, thank you. And through the mayor, I will be supporting this report, Mr. Mayor. We did a big brownfield adjustment up when Smart Centers went in at Clyde and Maryvale. I think this is a good policy. We're hearing from staff they don't think they're bringing forward any changes in the future. And quite frankly, the notion of leaving a brownfield is not palatable if we can move something forward. And I appreciate the fact that developers are taking advantage of this to get these sites cleaned up and doing so by following the available policy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions or comments on the report? Carried. Thank you. Next item that's been held is brownfield rehabilitation. I think Councillor McCrae's comments were relevant on the previous item for 1445 and 1451 Wellington Street West. We have no delegations. Questions and comments? Councillor Hume?
Councillor Hobbs wants to introduce it. I'd like to speak to it, and I have some. So I don't necessarily have any questions, Mr. Mayor, but I think we need some context around this in order for us to make a decision.
This is your councillor's report,
Thanks,
I believe.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just by means of providing some context, a chief goal that I had here was to avoid having something built that was outside of the community design plan in the Wellington West area. And I understand this committee is not concerned with the actual planning application, and this is not tied to that, but the reason for this request is because of that particular property. Now, Councillor McCrae just mentioned the cost of the cleanup, against the cost of the land. But when the cost of the cleanup, the 50% policy, when that exceeds the price of this land, then we obviously have an issue. So when Councillor Hume or Chair Hume suggested that we look at adjusting the brownfields policy, because obviously it's not working in the urban area, if we cannot accommodate the community design plan in the area, if we cannot make it financially viable for somebody to build within the GFA that's allowable under the CDP, we have no option but to look at this policy. Now, staff is not recommending that we alter this policy. Staff has also issued a refusal report on this development. So I have a community that is left with a property that's in a key area, Island Park Drive in Wellington. It's a gateway to our community, to our business community. It's a key intersection. 30,000 so cars go by it today. And today there's a gas station on one corner, which is a nice gas station, the Island Park Esso, beautiful, and 3 other lots that are basically car lots or uninhabited at this time. So not exactly the best view and not exactly the best goal to have derelict lots at such key intersections in Kitchissippi Ward. So it's really a question here whether the city's policies are out of whack with the CDP, not whether they're out of whack, period, but whether or not our community design plan does make sense. Because if our policies don't make sense and they're clashing in this case, then we have no option but to look at that. The community was happy with this development. They were told at the beginning through a very extensive consultation that the developer felt that he could not build at 9 and arrived at 12-story solution. The community at large was happy with this. The ones that the primary opposition was not against the development, but people indicating they would prefer we stuck with the CDP, although they like the development. So there wasn't, at the public open house, that for the first time ever in Kitchissippi, people applauded the developer after his presentation. That never happens in Kitchissippi. But we are at an impasse here on a development that should have been, I guess, easier to come to some kind of agreement, but because of the CDP and everybody's desire to stick with the CDP. I do, the community does, I'm sure the developer would rather than go through this. Just for the sake of the members of my community who are looking for something to be built here. 5 other developers have walked away. This is a very contaminated site, and third parties around this site are affected. The ministry is looking for a lot more in cleanups now, and a condition of being able to build on this site will be to do the remediation in the surrounding properties. Although I can't tie this request to the specific property, and I would like this to be looked at in the next term of council, but I can't direct that either at this point, if this does pass today, I would tie this specifically to 1451 Wellington and when it comes to council. But I'll just leave it perhaps to Chair Hume, Councillor Hume, to fill in.
Right. So Councillor Hume and Councillor
Thank
Eichlein.
you. I think that, first of all, the committee must understand that when we do CDPs and we look at all of the sites, our brownfields policy is part of that CDP. And we say, and I think in the West Wellington case, and I'm not quoting verbatim, but that, you know, if there are contaminated sites, the brownfield policy is the way to clean those sites up. But in this, so, you know, we do understand and we do make sure that our policies work together, Mr. Mayor, so that when we have sites and we plan those sites, we understand that there are policies to aid and assist the development community in making those sites viable for whether that's their commercial activities or residential activities. But in this specific case, what we've got is a proponent who has said very clearly that the policy that we have doesn't work, and it doesn't allow for it doesn't allow us to achieve the outcomes that our brownfields policy is designed to achieve, which is the development of vacant and contaminated sites. So, and I take him at face value. I do. If he said that, I agree. But in order to make a change, Mr. Mayor, I think that what we need to do, and I think that and I understand what Councillor Hobbs is doing, but I think what we need to do is say to the applicant, you know, this has all been done through the newspaper, and we are here in a policy debate. I think we have to say to them, if that's the case, that the policy isn't sufficient to allow development to occur on urban sites in the city, show us. You know, take your site as an example, provide the detailed work plan and cost estimates prepared by a qualified person, you know, as defined by the Environmental Protection Act for all eligible environmental remediation and risks. Give us a cost estimate provided by a bona fide contractor. Actually demonstrate that this isn't working for us. Put it all in a submission. Send it to Mr. Mizzi and say, Mr. Mizzi, look at, here are the facts around this development. It isn't working. We would like you to look at it and advance when we believe the policy should be changed. And I think, and Mr. Mark may help me here, that that's a much more appropriate way to change the policy development, to change the policy. I mean,
Mr. Mayor, as Mr. Thompson or Mr. Smith said on the last item, there's an expectation of there being a consistent approach with respect to brownfields, and so it would be a much better approach to receive that sort of information, look at it on a policy basis, and then for council to determine if a change needs to be made to the brownfield rehabilitation community improvement plan.
So Mr. Mayor, in this regard, I would suggest that this. And I understand what Councillor Hobbs is doing. She's in a bit of a tricky spot. But in the policy development process, I think we need to turn it back to the proponent who said, you know, your policy isn't working, it's not sufficient, and say, okay, prove it. Put together a submission to Mr. Mizzi, allow him to evaluate it, and bring forward a recommendation to the relevant committee. The recommendation may be, look, I've looked at this, I really think the policy is sufficient, or, you know what, this proponent is right. that this site will never be developed without some further assistance, and neither will 27 other sites in the City of Ottawa that we've looked at it. So we've got a much stronger policy and research on which to base a change in our policy. So, Mr. Mayor, I would refer this to staff to await a response from the proponent, and I would say to him, and the committee can say to him, you know, please provide the relevant documents and information that substantiates your claim, and as in the normal course of the policy development process, we'll review that, and if a change is required, it will come forward, and if it isn't, it won't. But right now, all we've got to base our discussion on is someone saying it's not working for me. Well, great, prove it. And I think that, you know, he may be right, I take him at face value, but we need to have the numbers in front of us. You know, if Mr. Mark has a different turn that the committee can take on this, then I'd be interested to hear from it. But my advice would be, you know, you can table this report, you can send it back, you can do whatever you want with it. But I think if the only thing we do is ask the proponent to back up his submissions with the numbers with respect to his specific case as a demonstrator, I think that would be of benefit.
Thank you. Councillor Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess this is probably a question for Mr. Mark. Yesterday we got a written submission which suggested if this motion was successful today that it would be the equivalent of bonusing under the legislation. Can you comment on that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The provisions in the Municipal Act dealing with bonusing actually specifically exclude grants under the Brownfields Community Improvement Plans. So no, it would not violate that provision of the Municipal Act.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Councillor Clark.
Well, I agree with Councillor Hume, and I really did appreciate Councillor McRae exposing some of the foibles. I do believe that there should be some wiggle room for staff in these situations. Now, whether it's 50% limit on policy or whether it's 62%, I agree that with Councillor Hume's position that we need to take a look at the claims being made, not just grant the money. You know, we could play chicken with them forever, but I guess the reality is that Councillor Hobbs thinks that he's sincere, and what Peter Hume says is, let's check this sincerity out. I don't think there's anybody objecting that if we can facilitate this, we should. And I think that's really what the motion's about, facilitating the, I guess, recovery of that site on a major street. So I think it's important for us not to throw the baby out with the washwater, don't just turn this down, but perhaps table it and perhaps give staff some leeway to come back in a month or so with the, having had some further discussions directly with the developer. Yes, Councillor Hobbs.
I just want to make the point that the developer has offered to do that, and so that is something that is out there. All the reports, they have 3 reports, 2 are on the public record, 1 is not because of the effect on the third parties, but they have indicated in writing that they are more than willing to do that. The goal here for me in asking for this is to ensure that they could build to the 9-story and not the 12-story. And Chair Hume was talking about how this has been thought out in the newspaper, and the newspaper may not have been clear on that. The general public feel that this brownfield policy is taxpayer money or a cash payout to a developer. It is not. It's a loss of opportunity cost, and I recognize that and not happy about that. And the fact is that I don't want an exception in this policy so we can go ahead and build a 12-story. The exception in the policy so is that we can ensure they would build the 9-story that is allowable. And that's the only reason why I'm asking for it. Thanks.
So just so I'm clear on this, and I don't want to mix the issue with that's going to your committee, Councillor Hume, but my understanding is, notwithstanding the fact that they knew this report, the builders knew this report was here, they still proceeded asking for a greater height. Did they not, Councillor Hobbs?
They've been consistent in what they've asked for. When they started the consultation, thanks, Mr. Mayor, when they started the consultation with the community, actually when they came in to see me a year ago, I said absolutely not. We just signed, sealed, and delivered the community design plan. I'm not at all interested in you talking about building over the 9 stories. You would have to have overwhelming community support. And they went out and spent a year designing this building with the community. They had 2 designs. They let the community pick. They did absolutely everything that the community wanted. The abutting neighbors are asking for help here because they are supporting this, and they feel that this is the best design for them. They are afraid of what might be built to plan that will negatively impact them, and there are single-family homes directly behind this site. So it has been a strange situation where we have a lot of community support, and this community support evolved with the developer always being upfront about what was required here. It wasn't until we kind of got to the point where the application was put forward where there was a hue and cry to stick to the CDP. That hadn't been what had happened in the community. It hadn't been what the letters I was getting reflected, and they wanted something good. I mean, this is a very nice community, and they want something beautiful built here, and so there was that direction from the community. Now they are feeling that there is uncertainty, and they're also feeling that their voices aren't being heard in this case, that CDP takes a lot of people to come together and develop. When they go through a year of consultation on a particular application, their voices should be just as important at that point as well. So they're feeling unheard, and it's true this is a tricky situation for me. I have a lot of members of the community wanting this, and I have the city staff saying, no, we're not going to do this. So that is, that's left me with limited options on how to come to a resolution, and we don't want to have fights in the neighborhood and unpleasant things happen in terms of building. And so when they're happy with a building application, and if we could get it to 9 stories, that would be the ideal. And so this was an option to try and do that. I was looking for everything to be looked at in the CDP area to ensure that it could conform. That's not something we can commit to doing without going to a lot of work, so I'm not asking for that at this point, just for this sole exception at this point.
Mr. Mark, so tell me what the precedent would cause if we were to provide 100% for this project. What's the basis to say no to the next project, and would we be subject to an OMB appeal because this group got it and another group that's applying down the road? We just approved, to remind members of committee, a proposal on Saint Laurent at 50%. Mr. Mark.
Mr. Chair, when the update to the policy came forward on May 12, 2010 to Council, the consultant retained by the City at the time expressed a grave concern about Council treating applications inconsistently. The consultant was very firm on the view that Council should have a strong policy basis for its determination with respect to Brownfield's relief, and if new circumstances presented themselves, they should, as I said in response to a question by Councillor earlier, there should be a broad policy-based analysis of what was being purported by the way of exception, and the matter looked at that time in a citywide context. It would raise concerns about discriminatory approach if, in the light of a policy that had been reviewed by Council in 2007 and then reviewed again by Council in 2010, Council, without a policy basis, made a one-off, if you will, exception, Mr. Mayor, to that approach. The relief wouldn't be the interimus board, the relief would be in the courts, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so that's an important message. Thank you. Councillor Hume, then Councillor
So Mr. Mark, in order to, I'm trying to figure out a way to, I heard what you said. The report that's before us, without, and if the applicant came forward and said, look, here's my situation, I'd like to initiate the broad review that you've just talked about, how, in that context, how would it be best to deal with this report?
Mr. Mayor, in listening to the comments made by the councillor earlier of the various options referring, tabling, my recommended approach would be to refer this matter back to Planning and Growth Management to seek further information from this particular applicant as to its situation and to conduct a policy-based review of the concerns raised by the applicant.
And Mr. Mayor, based on what Mr. Mark said, I'm prepared to do that. And if after their review, staff warrant coming forward, they will, and if they don't, they won't. So I'm prepared to move referral back to Planning and Growth Management.
Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll support Councillor Hume's motion as well. I just want to get some context on this. Could staff tell us how many brownfield applications we've dealt with this term of council, and have we ever exceeded the 50% before in this term?
I can't say the exact number for this term of council. I think we probably deal with, on average, a dozen or so a year, give or take. They're becoming more and more frequent because the sites that are available for development are becoming more constrained, and they tend to have more issues associated with it, brownfields contamination being one of them. So we are seeing a higher degree of frequency of these types of applications coming forward. In terms of whether or not we've ever modified from the 50%, the short answer is no, we have not.
Okay, thank you. And is it not so that the technology is also evolving, that's probably why we're seeing a bit of an increase in these applications, is that we have technology available now for rehabilitating these lands to make it more affordable to do so?
The technology is there, and I guess as you go through it, it becomes more and more developed, so it might become more economical, but I think the other thing that's happening too is standards do start to increase. I think Councillor Hobbs made mention of that as well, that there was a more rigorous standard that was set by the MOE, so the standards are a little bit higher than they were previously, so I think it probably balances itself out at the end of the day.
And one last question. This property has just recently, like in the last couple of years, changed hands, correct? We're not helping out someone that's been trying to rehabilitate this property for years and unable to do it. This is someone that just recently bought this land and now is looking for the taxpayer to help them develop it.
In terms of the current purchaser, that's correct, but my understanding, as Councillor Hobbs has indicated, that this site has been looked at by others in the past, and for whatever reasons, either the asking price is too high or whatever they found through their due diligence, it didn't make sense for them. But I am aware that it is a site that's been looked at for potential purchase over time, but this is the first one that's actually made the step forward to do something, as I understand it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Aguilar.
Yeah, just a bit of clarification. I'm not sure what the question is for Councillor Hume or for Mr. Mark, but the referral we're talking about here is to look at whether or not it would be appropriate, based on real evidence, to do a one-off for this particular project, or to look at the whole process.
Mr. Mayor, my advice was based on indeed asking information from this applicant to get the particular circumstances of its case straight, but it was as part of a broader policy analysis, to be sure.
Well, and the reason I asked the question is Councillor Hume, you talked about as part of what you wanted to see why it won't work for us, and it won't work for, I think you said, 27 other properties. So what are we asking them to do in particular?
I'm following the advice of Mr. Mark, right? And Mr. Mark is saying that in order to look at this, you've got to look at it on a broader context. We may find, after seeing the evidence, they may find, not we, they may find, after seeing the evidence that's put forward, that there is not a rationale to go to the larger discussion, and if that's the case, it ends there. But if it is true that this site can't develop, and there are similar sites, and we know where most of them are, then we should, at that point, say, okay, do we have this policy right? And so I think it all depends on the evidence that this proponent brings forward to show that the policy is not working, and won't work. So I have and I don't know if you can do that, because I haven't seen any of the. I've seen some of the documentation that says this is a contaminated site, but I haven't seen the documentation that says, and this is the cost, that this is what it's going to cost to clean it up. And I think that you need to see that. The public needs to see that, because the public needs to be convinced, just like that this policy doesn't work. It doesn't work for this site, and it may not work for other sites.
No, fair enough. I'm prepared to support the referral on that global approach. I just didn't want to do it on looking at one piece. So I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Well, I'm agreeing with deferral as well, but I think that the issue is not whether the broad policy makes sense. It may be a question of percentages, but I think it's important to understand that if we want to have a 34-story tower, because the cost of factoring in of the decontamination of the site requires that you have a larger revenue stream from the property, is that our job? I don't know. But I think it's quite clear that if we want to have the community involved and limit the developer to what he can do, then we have to look whether there's any bending possible. And if you had to go back to the OMB where he says you did this, fine, but it would be in the question of a specific project, and that specific project then would warrant better examination. But usually it's just cost avoidance. Well, cost avoidance is a lovely motive, but basically we've reduced the height of this building, and to make that affordable, that's what he's saying, he wants to do that. Well, that may be something we have to consider. I don't know. It's more than just a policy consideration for Greenfield. It's a policy consideration as to how much we want to make the developer justify what he's asking for, and that's a whole new bag of worms, I think. But anyway, we'll leave it at that.
I want to thank members of council for their input on this, and I understand from Councillor Hobbs' perspective it's a challenging file, but I'm actually not going to support deferral because we have a policy. It's 50%. We've accepted that 15 minutes ago. We accepted in Councillor Eglai's ward for that Hunt Club development a couple of months ago. And I just think we would have a tough time explaining to all of those other companies that came forward in good faith and said 50% is the limit, and that's the limit. And as a result of us now even musing about this, we're going to have other companies that will be coming and asking the same, number one. Secondly, they may be holding back their application saying, great, I'm going to hit the jackpot at 100%, let's hold off while we have this discussion. And, I think the old consumer line, buyer beware, builders have to be aware that when they buy a property, they have to take into account that they have to clean it up. And while I think the brownfields policy is a good one from a public policy point of view, I think going to 100% is too excessive and too rich for the taxpayers of the City of Ottawa. So while I appreciate Councillor Hume trying to find some middle ground on this difficult issue, I think we're just simply putting off the inevitable, because the company's known about this motion for a couple of weeks. They could have easily provided all the documentation to show that it's extenuating circumstances. But I would even be hard-pressed to go, and I think anyone can come up with a set of extenuating circumstances to suit their purposes. Yes, we'd like to see something very special in that corner of Wellington and Island Park Drive, but at what cost? And I don't think it's fair for us to change the policy midway through this council. One of the things that we get criticized for a lot is inconsistency, because we have a zoning bylaw that says this and we allow that, and we have an official plan that says this and we allow that. This is an example where I don't think we should be going forward and even contemplating a change, because the 50% threshold has worked very well, and we've seen the number of applications that have come in and the exciting projects that have developed as a result of us providing some relief for cleanups of toxins and so on. So Councillor Hume has a motion, if he could provide that for me, and I'll ask for yeas and nays on the deferral.
It's just a referral motion, Mr.
Yeah, or a referral rather to staff.
Word that, Mr. Mark. Refer the subject report to PGM. To PGM.
Seek information.
To receive information from.
On 1445 and 1451 Wellington Street.
1441.
And to conduct a policy-based review.
And to conduct a policy-based review. There we go, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I think it's up on the screen. So this is the referral motion to staff and to review the whole policy. Yeas and nays, please.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor Deeds?
No.
Councillor Eglai?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Councillor Hume?
Yes.
Councillor McRae?
No.
Councillor Monette?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
No.
Councillor Thompson?
No.
Councillor Clark?
Yes.
Mayor Watson?
No.
5 yeas, 6 nays.
Okay, so that's defeated. On the report, yeas and nays, please. Just to remind people, this is the Councillor number 12 that we do give the 100%. So I'm going to be voting no on that. Councillor McRae.
Mr. Mayor, I'm trying not to complicate things, but I'm wondering, given the debate that happened and the vote, if committee through Councillor Hobbs wants to withdraw the report, or if we want on the record yeas or nays on this.
Because then it can't come back if it's deemed to be.
The councillor can withdraw it with committee's consent.
Because maybe the clerk's office could weigh in. The reason for that is that it can't come back.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the councillor is correct. The advantage, if you will, of withdrawing a report is that, as Councillor McRae says, if you withdraw it and you decide to raise it differently, you can do so, whereas if it's defeated, it's at an end for this term of council.
Mr. Mayor, my reason for suggesting that, just, if it's okay, just to provide flexibility to the councillor, because I know how I'm going to vote, and I kind of think committee may vote the same way, but it provides Councillor Hobbs, I sympathize with him, Mr. Mayor, like you said, with my colleague, but I'm certainly not supportive of the report in front of me. This may give the councillor an option to make a change that might be more palatable, or work on this differently, Mr. Mayor.
So Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, if that provides me with better options in the future, I'd be certainly willing to withdraw the report.
Yeah, I think just to be clear, it does provide you with an option to come back, but I think you probably have a sense that there's not the appetite to go to the 100%. So it's your choice, and ultimately committee can concur with your request to withdraw.
Yeah, and I do agree with that. This was a sort of a last-ditch effort to try and resolve this issue, but from a loss of development charges and a loss of future opportunity in terms of taxes is a big issue, and there's another site that was a $12 million cleanup minimum that we turned down at planning last year, and we're in the courts about now. And I do recognize the major impact. I just am trying to avoid the individual situation here from occurring. But
So would you like to ask committee to withdraw with the concurrence of committee? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Item number 13 is a feasibility report on potential public-private partnership for planned recreational complex in southeast Ottawa. This is a councillor's report. Councillor Darash, if you'd like to come and introduce it, and I know Councillor Deans asked that we hold this. Councillor Darash, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand there's some questions, and happy to take some, and Mr. Chenier is here as well to answer questions. In the southeast part of the city, in the urban area, there are two communities that are growing very rapidly, Riverside South and Leitrim. Both are being developed under a community design plan. We are obviously trying to build balanced and sustainable communities where we have recreational, retail, and employment part of the large employment area. Certainly, my focus over the last 9 years has been to deliver to these communities the necessary infrastructure, hard infrastructure that they need to go to work and to go to school. We've made some good progress, and I appreciate the support of Council and the federal provincial government, but we're now at the point where we need to look at some of the softer services, such as parks and recreation. There is a recreational complex planned for this community. It is identified in the DC bylaw. We are looking at a time frame of around 2018 where we would undertake that under our existing approach, which is to collect the DCs and build it when we get approximately to 50% of development in the community. I think we've seen some very positive success with both the P3 hockey rinks in the east and the western part of the city. I think there is good potential for a P3 project here in South Ottawa, and I think if we are to undertake that we should be very proactive and start to send signals now that we're interested in considering that as an option. So the report asks staff to spend some time looking at the feasibility and the possibility of a P3 hockey facility in the southeast quadrant of the city. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll take questions, or Mr. Chenier.
Okay, and I should point out, grinning over on the corner is Councillor Tierney, who started a trend. Congratulations. Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to start by commending my colleague, Councillor DeRoche, for this report. Certainly well aware of the growing communities of Finlay Creek and Riverside South and the need for these kind of recreational facilities. I don't think that's an issue, but as Councillor Taylor can attest to, I've found myself in the middle of some interesting ice time debates of late, and it seems that you kind of need like a doctoral degree in ice time allocation to understand how we go about allocating ice time. But it is quite complicated, and I know in the community there is a sort of a simmering ice time debate issue out there. And so that brings me to the whole issue of P3s and what impact P3s has on our ice time as a city, because my impression, and Mr. Chenier, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that we have a glut of off-hour ice time, and what we really need is peak time ice time, and that does P3s don't really necessarily get us there, because the partner always wants the peak ice time, and we get left with the remnant ice time, which is exactly what we don't need. So just tell me if I'm right or wrong about that, and if, in fact, this would get us and get Councillor DeRoche the outcome that he's looking for.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the councillor is right that P3 peak time, ice time, remains a scarce commodity, even though in the last decade or so, the city's involvement in building ice, both directly and through P3s, we've essentially increased the supply by something like 27%, while the population has not risen quite that quickly, mostly through P3s. And one of the issues there, of course, is that our partners in P3s do want to have a viable business case for selling primetime ice. And, of course, our demand is as well to have primetime ice. What we've done in the existing P3s is to purchase from them a secured amount of ice time in the arenas. So, for example, at the most recent, at the Sensplex East, we will have purchased essentially the equivalent of a full arena of primetime ice. And then the other 3 arenas will, for the most part, be P3 ice. The groups that Councillor Deans refers to, of course, are groups that want prime time at city-subsidized rates. And that's where some of what the P3 partners put on the market doesn't always meet with, especially some of the minor leagues that are looking for the $150 an hour ice are faced with much higher costs if they're going to go to P3s. Now, a lot of them have substantial contracts with our P3 partners and have found a way to make that work through fee increases, through sponsorships, through fundraising and those kinds of things. But that does remain a dilemma. With respect to the new Riverside South complex that we're planning, the DCs that are being collected and the initial design concept for this was a 2-pad arena. Part of the review that we would undertake if committee and council approves this report is in a P3 environment, would a 2-pad be sufficient, or would we have to look at a 4-pad to make this a viable business opportunity for a P3 with the connected issues of having enough land at the proper site, all of which would have to be looked at as part of that initial assessment phase.
So we would have to double the ice pads to make this work? Is that what you're saying?
Of course, without a partner, it's difficult to say, but in the past, our discussion with P3 partners has always been that their preference is to go into a quad-type situation with 4 ice pads. Presently, on the site that has been looked at for the next complex, that would probably be a tight fit, but I guess part of our review over the next little while would be whether there's an opportunity either through a P3 arrangement or another look at this to secure enough land to look at a 4-pad if that was what made the P3 a viable option. So those are the kinds of things we would look at and come back with a recommendation on.
Okay, well, I have no problem looking at it. I just starting to wonder if P3 is a panacea for us, because maybe it's just not taking us where we need to go to address our needs. But having said that, I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong. I'm just saying we need to look at our needs going forward, and we need to understand if that's the best approach going forward to meet the demands, especially because it seems like there is not enough primetime ice in this city for all of the people that want to use it. And we have to make sure that ultimately, however we go about future builds is meeting the city's demands for that ice time. So that's the only question I want to raise. I have no problem with taking a look at this and reporting back. I just wonder if we keep an open mind about looking at some other opportunities that might better address our needs.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Deans. Councillor Tierney, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'm taking this opportunity for a quick plug. August 7th, it looks like we'll have the big ribbon-cutting announcement for our brand-new Sensplex East. I'll tell you, my community is very happy to see this ice, and I know it's going fast and furious. What really isn't fun after 9 years of coaching, I am less concerned about the prime time. It's just the availability period of the ice. And when you're having to trek, 10, 15 minutes at 6:30 in the morning across the city to another piece of ice, it's a challenge. So I support Councillor DeRoche's thoughts on this, and I'm hoping that we do move forward. on more P3s for a couple of reasons. One, the federal government, as part of their funding agreements, force you through a P3 screen. This is probably one of the only opportunities that you're really going to have where it would fit. So I think this is, again, a really good opportunity for us. The ice won't go unused. You're not going to build a white elephant. Trust me, there's lots of kids out there that need that ice, and I'd like to see them out there. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm just going to speak to and just briefly to building new rec centers and how complex and expensive that is without a partner. Our partner right now is development charges, so our developers that are building the communities, and the fastest growing communities in the city are in the south. They're certainly from Barrhaven, Riverside South, and Leitrim, and they will be this year connected by the bridge. I can tell you that my youngest grandson, who is 8 years old, goes for practices in Navan, has to go to practices in Stittsville, goes for practices at Canterbury, all over the city. That's how dire the availability is for ice, even for little kids. And so, really, how do you create the balance? Well, we know that a few years ago, Councillor Hume and I looked at the development charge rules and said, hey, you don't need to have 100%. The province says you don't need to have 100% of the money from development charges saved, as long as you have 50%, and by the time the place opens, you have the other 50. Well, that's what we're doing with the Minto Rec Centre Barrhaven, Mr. Mayor, as you know. It's going to be completed this year on time and on budget, $53 million, and it's going to include 2 NHL ice pads. But make no mistake about it, we're not going to be able to satisfy the needs even with that. We have the largest minor hockey organization in Canada, I think, the Nepean Minor. We have Councillor DeRoche's son plays with Leitrim. They play out in Metcalfe. They play all over the city, and we're always looking for more space. So we're only going to be able to sustain the need for ice surface users by being innovative and looking at P3s. So I think that this is well worth the time, and I thank Councillor DeRoche for bringing it forward.
Great. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad that my colleague, Councillor Harder, mentioned Metcalfe, because it is a great arena, and Osgood. And I support the efforts of Councillor Deputy Mayor El Shantiri. We have in DeRoche. He looks like from our meeting last night, I was talking so much about the other deputy mayor, but we have had about 5 years ago there was interest in developing a double ice pad, a private group near the racetrack. It didn't work out. We have interest now in a proponent who is in the early stages of looking at an arena in the village of Greeley, though I think it's a long shot. And so I think that the development of an ice pad complex in this area would serve Osgood Ward and Rideau Goulburn and Riverside South. So I think that I appreciate the work that Councillor Deputy Mayor DeRoche has done, and would look forward to following this through.
Great. Thank you. On the report? Carried? Carried. Thank you, Councillor DeRoche. Our next item is in camera, so we have a motion to move in camera by Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 14, collective bargaining update, QP 503, CIPP, and OPFA. This is just reporting out, not to be reported out after the meeting. Moved that in accordance with procedure bylaw 2006 number 462 as amended, Finance and Economic Development Committee resolve in camera pursuant to subsections 13.1d labor relations employee negotiations and 13.1f receiving of advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary, with respect to collective bargaining in 2014 with QP 503, Civic Institute of Professional Personnel, and Ottawa Professional Firefighter Association. Move in camera to hear this information.
Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute recess before moving. Carried on the motion. Carried. We'll take a 5-minute recess before moving in camera. I'd ask that the room be cleared, and staff who do not need to be present, please leave the room as well.
And that passed number 3, so I'm going to inquire about number 2. That the rate supported deficit in the first quarter shown as caused by reduced consumption vis-a-vis the budgeted usage expectation, yet the report specifically notes that the 2013 performance was a deficit, and 2014 projects a net balance of $5.1 million, which is positive. Can we have a more detailed analysis of the projections and the effects on this year's budget?
Okay, if you can give that to the clerk. Thank you.
Inquiry number 2. I'll skip number 3 because it escapes me at the moment. We have been taking road widenings on renovations/rebuilding through the site plan process. After taking these lands and with no immediate plans for any road widening and in fact no ability to utilize these lands as isolated pieces, we then insisted that the priority owners sign an encroachment agreement on the lands we just took from them and pay the city a fee for utilizing the lands that we have confiscated. Having been assured this encroachment agreement would not carry a fee, I want the matter to come before us so that council may debate the policy.
Okay, thank you. You can hand that to the clerk. Other inquiries? Other business? Adjournment? Councillor Clark, please.
Yeah, move that we adjourn.
Carried? Carried. Thank you. Our next meeting, la prochaine réunion, le 3 juin, 3rd of June. Meeting adjourned.